Hello, Matteo. Welcome back.
Hello. Hi, Luca. I'm back. Wow. Amazing.
Yeah, and it's kind of very refreshing with our new kind of like identity and so on. So it's kind of
Ah,
like
it's so good. I love it. I love
yeah.
it.
Luckily, we put a name to what we were doing, which is kind of like
We
good.
should have we started with the name? No, I don't think so, right? I think
We should have started probably 2 years ago to make this thing, but better late than never. So now
better
we also
later
have
than never. Yeah.
now we have something. Today we are actually talking about something that we have been discussing in the past with a lot of people is the infamous make versus build
Yes. Oh
and the not invented here syndrome, which
gosh. Yes.
you don't know, but millions of people are affected by this syndrome.
Oh,
And is
everybody, everywhere. I think to
yeah,
some
and is the
point.
arch enemy of value for many companies, and that's I think something that today we are bringing awareness to the world about this problem.
Yep. Yep.
And it's kind of like the reason why there is sometimes a lot of I don't want to call it stasis, but a lot of inertia in certain companies that you and I helped in the past. But I think let's start. So we spoke last week. Let's see, my memory. We spoke about the Mac and the composable architecture, microservices, API first, headless,
BFFs, Kafka,
and
PHP.
but that's we go way back. I mean, it's before last week. But last week we ended with this thing saying this new composable architecture, right, for the
Yes.
modern e-commerce, modern content-driven experiences. Let's call it in
Yes.
this way. And all this composability, and I mean, I cannot name stuff, but I saw stuff on my LinkedIn that they gave me shiver. Right, my tattoo became 3D almost. Looking at
Really?
that.
Wow.
Yeah, and I wish I could unleash the raven to attack them, but fortunately, it's just a painting on my arm. And all this composable, new world, and all these new companies that they're claiming I'm giving you the composable platform for your e-commerce, right? It sells flexibility, freedom, speed. Do you believe them? I don't.
Uh, okay, let's unpack. Okay, Luca, because I am in I think the make versus build type of scenario, okay, is very, very specific to it's a framework in which executive needs to make decisions, okay, and the resulting technical architecture and the resulting performance of that architecture, okay, even in conversion, in sales, whatever, is a function of those choices, okay. So, and then it comes down to, I think, making those trade-offs, okay. And I think I've seen both ways, okay. To we want to use we do everything in house, okay, 100% in house, including custom React meta frameworks, okay, which is
Which
very common, but it's been very, very, very common, by the way. And from there from that level down to no, we only use stock components. We don't even want to write our own database queries. We use everything more or less via APIs. Everything is using integrating SaaS and so on and so forth. We write nothing. Okay.
Mhm.
So it's basically those two,
The two extremes, right?
there are the two extreme, okay, side of the word. Okay. Generically, I tend to, like, said, there is a company that I was consulting with a lot of years back. They said, no npm dependency. We only use Node. Okay. Or another one says, oh, we don't use any dependencies for Java. We only use Java, the JVM, and the default library. Again, this is the key. We can discuss this. Okay.
I mean, I think what you just said is super common, right? As a discussion point.
It's a discussion point. Okay. I think it's the make versus buy, where buy can also be buy in the form of, the risk of a maintainer in Nebraska not supporting you anymore, okay, to the risk of an API vendor going bust. So there was a few SaaS recently that went under. And if you were one of the customers using those SaaS, you were and storing like important business data there, what are you going to do?
Well, we had one here in Vancouver that a week before tax season declared bankruptcy.
Yeah.
So,
and they were handling taxes, right? They were doing something tax related.
Bench.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I remember that. That was, that destroyed a lot of people. Okay, like I think that was very tough moment for a lot of people.
Yeah, I mean, luckily I pay a very expensive accountant to do what a SaaS could actually do in 5 minutes, but but at least it's reliable. At least it's reliable. We should have a banter about the reliability of my account. No, I love him. Ken, if you're listening to that.
Well, it's reliability of tax accountant is very important. Hello to my team in Bologna. Hello, you're doing great. By the way.
We dedicate this episode to our accountant. But you mentioned something interesting, because I think there are multiple financial and economical dimension in that decision.
Yes.
So one is cost of maintenance versus acquisition value to the company.
Yes.
Which is kind of like an interesting angle when you think about certain realities. Like, for example, when you think about scale up companies that they are building their value proposition on the market versus consolidated enterprise that they have cost of maintenance as one of the high OpEx spending. But now that I mention OpEx, is always the OpEx CapEx conversation then, right? So there are so many dimensions from a financial and economical standpoint that makes it very, very interesting. But what actually I would like to start is with a point that you just made, that is integrating SaaS, because everyone thinks that integrating a SaaS is cheap, it's easy, it's frictionless.
It's cheap, it's easy. Okay, so to be clear, some time ago, I was working on this project that integrated a very, very popular headless commerce APIs, and a small team, a tight team, okay, of senior engineers, shipped it in 3 months. With we can talk about the rates, but you know the rates, Luca. So you can imagine the total budget for this.
That's easy. How many people in the team?
I'm not going to cover the rates, Luca.
No, but if it's easy, right? So the average is around $200 an hour per person, and then you multiply by 8, so it's $1,600 an hour per day per person.
4 people, Luca. Come on, not that many.
4 people, so it's basically $7,200 a day times 60. So
cheap. Okay. So yeah, this is fun, right? Costly.
$500,000 to make this.
Yeah, I know it was way less than that, but it's luckily. But the TLDR is that what generically would it cost to build a skin, a front-end commerce skin, completely custom, okay, with custom logic, custom integration, everything custom for a popular e-commerce, okay?
Yeah.
Which sounds like a lot of work, right?
Yeah.
So
depends by the size, yeah, but it's not like an afternoon
it's not an afternoon project, okay? Especially if you want everything custom, okay? Like the reason if you want to do these kind of things is very often because you want to customize the experience to the tiniest little detail.
Yeah.
And therefore, that is your focus, and you prefer to spend the budget on that versus, re-implementing core e-commerce capability.
Yeah, and we said it last time, right? It's just that does it really make sense for an e-commerce that sells whatever lipstick to build a payment system, or you just go to Shopify and call it a day?
So anyway, the make versus buy discussion here is always for me, it's very simple, okay? The first question that I ask when evaluating that decision is what I want to buy a core feature or a core part of my product, okay? If it's a core part, if it's not a core part, okay, it's generically better to buy it. Why? Because if you build it yourself internally, you likely will have less budget available than buying it.
and
therefore the answer will be a half-cooked solution that will not be fulfilling all the requirements. So the outcome here is literally don't do it. Like I'm buying it because I'm getting a better result for the money that I'm spending. So
and Theo, just one thing when you mentioned core, right? Because it came to mind while you were saying core is one thing, and the other one is this core functionality part of my competitive advantage.
Yeah. That's what I said. That's what I meant. Okay, that's the right word. Okay, is that functionality part of my competitive advantage? Not only that, is that functionality part of the core capabilities, okay, in the sense of the liability term, okay? Like if that part goes down or it has a problem, okay, or that vendor disappear, can I keep going? Okay.
Correct. What's the cost of disruption? Right?
What the cost of disruption? Okay, essentially. So anyway, this is make versus buy, essentially. On that, so the question is, if it's not core, if it does not give me any competitive advantage, better buy it, or better buy it externally, or even asking some agency to do it, or you can find like a lot of different solutions here, from a pure custom build by an agency, external agency, to a pure SaaS that you go integrate. Okay, with a small team. Okay, this is the key part. This is the first point. Now, let's talk about the competitive advantage things. Okay, the functionality of the product, because that's the key part of the product. Okay, for me, okay, then the question is way more subtle. Okay, do I have the technical skills? Do my company, my team, has the technical skills to build that product?
So is that part of still, like when we talk about executive, is this one?
Yes.
What is the risk factor of my capability in keep building and maintaining, basically?
Yes. So can I do it? Like the fundamental question is, can I do it internally? Okay. Like the answer can be, oh yes, absolutely. I have very top-notch engineers. Okay.
Yeah.
The answer can be, I think my team can maintain it long term. I need some help to get this bootstrapped. Okay. Or I need to have, some kind of support level contract that would, or my team can bootstrap the work, but then when we need to operate into production, we need to get get some support from the aspect of this technology, whatever, to build this thing, that have experience of running it in production. Okay, so there's this level of mostly yes, plus some additional support. Okay, or to be honest, here can just be I can buy a tiny component that tell me, or using a framework and buying the support from the company that provides that framework. There can be a lot of different nuance in this box. Okay, like or maybe just I take it and I sponsor the developers of that open source framework. Okay, I don't know, or send PRs onto that open source framework that I use. Anyway, this is a box. Okay, and then there is a value of despair that has a very shade of nuances. Okay, of colors, which is I have my team is incapable of doing a good job here. And I have seen that situation many, many times. And the result of that choices, and not understanding that they needed,
Yeah, the other thing is always, do I have enough capacity, right? Because sometimes you have the right people, but the capacity that you have is not,
Yeah, but yes, exactly. But that goes into the same box of, into the same discussion of, I cannot hire enough. Okay.
Yeah.
Like maybe I have enough, some good people. Okay. But if I try to hire, we were recently chatting with one of our customers that tell us that in order to interview, to get to hire one person, he needs to interview, not CV, interview 150. Okay. Like the ratio is almost impossible to.
Yeah, because the cost of hiring versus the cost of like renting, for example, like external is.
Yeah. If I can, what I'm saying is, if I can use something that is pre-built, either as a license or as a support contract or as a SaaS. Okay, like the key typical, one of the key typical question here is, okay, I need a database for my project. Okay. What do I use for hosting that database? I have a few choices. Okay, I can buy dedicated servers and plant them on my basement, on the rack in my basement, and manage everything myself. Okay, and then I'm responsible for swapping hard disks that are failing, and handling fires, thinking about flooding. I don't know, like these kind of risks. Okay, these are this kind of disaster recovery. Or on the other spectrum, I use a serverless database, completely ephemeral, that I talk to an API, tell it, give me a database, and it gives you a database. Okay,
yeah,
like there is the two again, two sides of the spectrum with a lot of things in between, from AWS solutions to MongoDB Atlas to Elastic to various shades to I'm running that thing on my own EC2 machines, but with some support from database specialists. Like there's a lot of options.
Yeah, I think the decision making metrics, when I was helping executives to kind of like funnel their decision making processes, I think it's very simple. At least once that you have knowledge of those fundamentals. The first, the y-axis is always the level of provided services, right? So you go from, like you were saying, from 0, which is I do everything myself, to in case of a database, I just run SQL instructions and I don't care about scalability. I don't care anything. And so you go into Supabase, Neon, or Aurora, or you name them, Big Table, and so on. On the y-axis, you have actually a very complex formula, in my opinion, that is a combination of basically cost value, right? What is the value? What is the SLA? What is the liability and the cost aggregated that I'm open to basically invest in a reverse way? So if the value is super high, I put 0. If the value is super low, it's infinite, right? Which means I try to go for more managed services, for services that they basically abstract everything, because the cost for me and the value, they're on a scale for which I'm okay with basically have everything managed, everything, I basically have no resources for that, in a nutshell. And to me, it makes it very simple, because if we take an example of where instead using a PaaS or a SaaS makes an extreme amount of sense, if you think is the use case of Datadog, right? Or using New Relic. So the whole, I don't even know call it traces, the whole logging and metrics kind of like use case. Because, I mean, let's be very honest. If you exclude the FANG and the top companies in the world, exclude them. They are not part of this discussion, right? They're never part of any discussion, right? But the average enterprise, let's be very honest, why investing time and energy in logging, tracing, metrics as a cost that is, I mean, you cannot really justify, right? There are out of, like, absurdly, AWS provides infrastructure for that, so why not using it, right? Don't go and build your own self-managed elk stack, right? It's to me doesn't,
and deploy it on in Kubernetes,
which is fine. I mean, it's better than deploying it on your own, bare machine or whatever. At least it self-heal. But the thing is, why? I mean, all these companies, they are ISO, PCI, HIPAA, they're all certification in this universe. They serve governments. So that for me is the use case where I would possibly, and then on the opposite, Matteo, because I think that's a frustration that we also had in the past. Things that shouldn't be outsourced or consumed as a service, they are. Like, I don't know, I can give you a plethora of examples of like building a self-inflicted, not the term, self-inflicted CDN. Why?
Ooh.
Why do you want to build your own CDN? Just like get one. I mean, if you don't know which one to pick, roll a dice, pick one. Like CloudFront, even, it's perfect, right? It's good enough.
Or even not using a CDN.
Or even the absurd is that not using a CDN and just like go all for self-hosted. For example, here we're going back in time, but you remember when basically websites. I mean, let's go back at the almost beginning of Node, when people were running Node straight without a reverse proxy, straight on the internet, right? I mean, it's as simple as, why don't you download Nginx and put it in front? It doesn't cost you money. It's free if you don't buy the plus version. That's for me the kind of like decision making metrics, right? Is going back to your initial point, is why self-inflicting ourselves that pain. And the thing is that if you think about the whole SaaS, if you think the whole IaaS, PaaS, SaaS, crescendo, then what we saw recently, and DHH was like a big voice to that, is the movement to on-prem, which kind of like brings us back to the circle of saying, I build everything myself, right? But once again, the economy of cost.
But that depends, okay? Because this is very clear, okay? Once you know what your product look like, okay, and you are more or less set on this on a fixed set of features, your product is slowly growing, but it's not that you are revolutionizing it all the time, okay?
No.
You probably at that point in time need to very quickly define capacity, okay?
Yeah.
And even then, and by the way, even DHH, okay, is placing racks in data centers, okay? So technically, you could go even more crazy and build your own. Okay, build your own data center. Okay, like at the top end of the spectrum. Okay.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, is the only way. This is the only way to be absolutely certain of data privacy. Okay, because it's you can put your physical security on your machines.
Yeah, but once again, we are talking about probably that small group. I mean,
yes, absolutely.
I can tell you that there is also legacy involved because.
Oh yeah, big time. Like I was chatting recently with a customer, and they were telling me that they had some Windows servers in the basement.
No, it's not so uncommon. Like if you think that many customers that are still in that mindset, right? Of saying, I mean, we talk with many of them in different eras of our working together that they had their own IBM mainframes.
Yeah, big time.
Center, right?
Oh, the best one, okay, that I had, that I saw, okay, was an e-commerce company that had a lot of warehouses, and each warehouses had software running locally to handle with possible internet outages, so that the warehouse can keep operating. Okay, so the full logistical, the computation of availability of a product was then managed by Kafka, by Kafka topics and so on and so forth, by different Kafka instances deployed everywhere and pulled from outside when the network could be reestablished. So that was wow, okay, to some extent, because it's there is also that, like, when you need to define reliability, especially with physical businesses, you need to define also the fact, how can I operate the business without the internet? Okay.
Yeah.
So there is also that, which is sometimes one of the discussion points.
And one very interesting thing, Theo, is that every single business what we saw, right? Also when I was in building that loyalty platform, there are different degrees of business continuity that every single company has in mind.
Yep.
They have different approaches. So I don't think actually that the on-prem cloud. So I'm a strong believer on hybrid. I think the cloud is super powerful, like you were saying, to accelerate the initial stage of market discovery and figuring out what works and what doesn't. But then this choice is hit by the economy of cost. And, to me, I'm still extremely surprised how many companies and many engineers sees the serverless movement as the way to solve all their problems.
Oh, the cost problem, because this doesn't match my calculations. So.
The cost, I always say one thing: cost can be.
Nor the AWS one, by the way. So there was that infamous blog post that was taken down by themselves.
Yeah, the cost is something that, like we said in the beginning, it's a very complex equation, but to me is basically that kind of like other side of the spectrum that says how complex it is for me to fulfill all my SLAs relying on this service. What is the key value for my business, and what is kind of like I'm still astonished. Like you and I were in Paris and we spoke with many people, and let's go all serverless. Right? I said, okay. I mean, sure, but I understand the choice, but I also read, without naming people because I would shame them way too much. There is a person that I follow by mistake. Actually, it's your fault that I follow this person. That is entertaining because there is the complete nonsense of now mixing serverless and AI.
Oh, it's so
Like,
good. It's so good. It's so good, Luca. You're missing, you're not appreciating the entertainment.
no, but that I think is, while DHH has a very strong
No,
technology foundation,
I love,
right?
okay. I really like the HH point, okay, because it's substantiated by math,
A real case, yeah, exactly.
by math, okay. And by the way, even the HH says some very key specific theory, okay, behind it. Okay, now these servers got so good that they never break.
Yeah,
Okay,
I agree. I
like
agree.
that is a fundamental difference that happened between, you know, um 20, 30 years ago, okay, even 15 years ago, to, I don't know, the last 5, 10 years, okay. Servers are super reliable, okay. like
100%.
beyond anything that you know you can imagine, especially because they have SSDs, okay, and no mechanical moving parts. That makes them incredibly reliable, okay. Like
100%.
the mean time
100%.
between failure of those things is very low. It's extremely low, okay. Considering that for physical disks, and then you see, if you buy an NAS, okay, because you need storage for your things, you start seeing the hard disk failure after, I don't know, 3, 5 years, okay. And with um, you can with SSDs, you start getting degradation maybe, but there is no hard failure, okay. Like there's no, it doesn't work anymore because the amount of moving part has broken down, okay. There's a thing moving, okay, and that thing that is moving all the time, it wears at some point, okay. The SSDs wears, these wears and tears on them too, but I, from all numbers that I've seen, way lower. And then all the other parts are redundant, have been made, like can
No,
be hot swapped. So there is very, very, like, you can essentially have no downtime, okay. Literally, um I have a dedicated server on Ethner, and that dedicated server on Ethner usually has 1 hour of downtime per year for some updated maintenance that they do on the networking stack of the switches and so on. It's like, I don't know, every 2 years or something, they probably change the switch or whatever, and they need to unplug it, or pull the plug and reboot. But that happens, only only if once every now and then. It's very rare.
yeah.
Okay.
And I mean, I'm a big fan of Brian Cantrell, so, and Steve Tuck, so I'm a big fan of what they're building Oxide. Um, there is actually a fun fact that I mean is outside of our conversation, but as servers kind of like got more reliable, consumer machines, powerful consumer machine, and I'm not shaming the latest generation of Mac Minis, they got very unreliable because just to make you laugh, I have a Mac Mini last generation, top spec with a 10 gig network because I have 10 gig around my house, and the network card goes offline every, I don't know, 4 hours. It gets like bam offline, and then somewhere magically gets back online. So I think there is kind of this interesting um, uh, evolution, right? The server got more reliable with a lower maintenance cost. Consumer, if you think about the iPhone, they got way more expensive to maintain because they are moving faster on a certain consumer need, and so I think there is this kind of like interesting generative thing in hardware. But I'm a strong believer on that hybrid world. Cloud is great for certain functionalities, extremely bad, I think, for other use cases. The hybrid seems to be a very good
It
mix and
seems a
match.
very good model to begin with.
Yeah, yeah. And the only thing that I still needed to kind of like understand and it will take me some time, is that kind of like analysis that DHH made on the S3 migration onto their own system. It's just that I think that there are certain components in the cloud that the cloud was actually born to do, like S3.
It took them, okay, to be clear, in order to migrate S3, it took them essentially forever, okay, because of the costs and complexity involved, but also the cost. Like doing that at very, very as cheaply as AWS can do. Like that service got cheaper and cheaper and getting more capabilities every year.
Is the durability like that is a very
you can exactly okay. That is for me is very. How can you get all those nines? Okay,
but it's a super complicated distributed system to build. There's a lot of replication, concurrency, a lot of once again, probably I said it already a million times, big time giant. So I loved at the time Menta. Super complicated system to build. Like it's so complicated. I always say to build such a system, you need giant level engineers. And going back to your initial point, which to me was extremely valid and correct, is still the kind of like curve of expertise that engineers have on the market, right? And I think what Giant had at the time was like uncomparable in terms of like knowing kernel, system, and internals. We started with a very interesting topic that was build versus buy, and the illusion of the simplicity of integration, the ease of maintenance, pushing liability. Now, in the second part of the chat, I want to ask you two things. Actually, let me start with one. You said that about the project you told, right? So, but what is the real burden to developers in integrating with built solutions? And what is on the opposite side, the big relief? If you can find an example for a burden and a relief.
Okay. So the big relief, okay. So the big burden, and so sometimes, okay, knowing a domain is very hard, okay. Especially there are some domains that are super hard. For example, okay, how to correctly model, okay, a product catalog that is not going to eat you alive in a month or a year, okay? Like a lot of very old school companies had a massive amount of problems, okay, to track individual products by color, okay, and size. So in fact, we do have, maybe a product ID, but then we have SKUs, okay? And the SKUs are essentially unique in that sense, okay? Other lines, okay, and in a lot of our time, in some more controlled lines, you need to even go around and track each individual item from the producer to the consumer.
Yeah.
Okay. And if you want to do that, okay, you need a system that provides that addresses all the problems for that use case. And you might think you can cook in-house 80% solution, maybe not even there, a 50% solution, okay? But frankly, this is a hubris, okay? You don't know if you don't know that domain, okay?
Yeah.
To know that domain well, it takes building a system to know that domain. And knowing one domain, it's fantastic because then you are a domain expert, okay? Usually those are getting paid very well, okay, in their domain. So, but that is key, okay? Like I was talking at some point with an engineer, okay? And I was stunned by the in-depth knowledge of its product space. Like he knew everything on how to model certain things. And it was wow, it's fantastic to work with such talented engineers because they know exactly their boundary. Okay.
Yeah.
And
correct.
they also know the most important thing when they were out of what they knew. Okay. And where they needed to ask. Okay. Essentially, they knew very well their known unknowns. Okay. And which it's very good to have. Okay. The problem in when you don't know anything about a domain, okay, is that are the unknown unknowns that you don't see at all.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
with
those are the traps, right?
the traps, with a bot solution, you get that experience already sorted. Okay. You get that domain expert and that you grab and you put it in. Okay. Which
Yeah.
massively reduce the risk of a fatal flaw in the design of the system that then you need to re-architect.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
So,
and one thing that I think it's kind of like interesting to look while we are coming to the end of our banter is it's a kind of like self-promoting thing, right? Because I think we discover a lot of the architecture, right? I think there is an equation that we need to follow more than an architectural pattern. And if you look at those kind of like decisions, they influence the so-called blueprint architecture and so on and so forth. But the what I think is very, very interesting is that there are certain components, and you mentioned open source, and I'm sorry to make a self-promotion in this moment, but there are certain pieces, and you mentioned Kafka, that are kind of like interesting to see how many organizations, they don't realize the impact of their choice of build versus buy versus just consume. And I explain. When we built our Kafka client, we knew, because we have been basically building Kafka scale since you and I met the first time, and we were together, so probably it's like a decade soon, that Kafka is a core component, I call it is the veins of any modern architecture.
yes.
We say, right?
Instead not any, but or not every, but
let's say the majority. That's correct. The majority, right?
Yes.
And in Node, we know that the choice is very limited. You build it yourself, implementing everything and blah 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 blah. We don't go there because we should probably make a tech talk about us.
No, actually, look at what we should be. This is actually a good thing. We should probably get Paolo to do a short video explaining how we built it, okay, and the challenges and how long it took. Okay, yeah. I think it will be a good talk to
having in-house to people like you and I that know Kafka inside out.
Yeah, exactly. And we still didn't know, by the way, like we still found a lot of odd behaviors, odd problems that we needed to essentially study from the source.
Yeah, because deeper you go in Kafka, the more you find that there are edge cases that they were covered with certain functionalities or they were abstracted.
I love it. By the way, it's fun. It's a phenomenal product, Kafka. I am in absolutely awe to it.
It's a brilliant piece of modern technology. But what I wanted to say is that you have this choice between a library that is completely unmaintained and the other one that is basically encrypted in its knowledge, and just get a fresh, clean library with the chance of support. And I know I'm self-promoting. We should probably put a banner, but one thing that is actually interesting that I want to tell everyone listening to our chat is that in that build versus buy, there is also what are you buying, right? And what are you buying sometimes is just a very good night's sleep without the worry that something breaks and you need to invest a humongous amount of time to fix one of your core components.
It's yes, it's also the problem of not just that, but it's also the problem of incidents. Okay,
yeah, correct.
and the risk of calling somebody if that's the case.
100%. And you know, that's when I was in Talos, the same thing. When I was helping companies, the same thing. When we were working with companies, the same thing. Right? It's always the same problem. I think that if you look at the buckets, there is a new dimension that is inside of your core decision, core architectural decision. The distance between the architecture implementation and the code implementation in this path, there is something that you can still, that you must still outsource, offload if you can. Like, to me, the most brilliant decision that I saw in Talos was, we are running on OpenShift, dear Red Hat, your problem to support it. We pay you, your problem to support it. That OpenShift cluster was, the cluster itself was always stable because it was outsourced on people that they know that they have liability on top of that, right?
Yes.
Inside of the organization, that when then the company migrated to GCP, the equation of cost changed completely because GCP doesn't give you that. You need to go to a partner.
Yeah.
And plus, who is maintaining the GKE cluster? Your internal team. And then this one, how much does it cost? You need a new division. It's a crazy equation. So I'm checking the time, Theo. We are almost at time of our usual chat. So I would say one thing to wrap up. We hope that this conversation opened the eyes and broadened the view of many of our listeners, that help people to basically build their own internal decision-making metrics, right?
Yeah.
But I'm looking forward to next week episode. We are not revealing anything. You follow us and you will see it, but it's going to be very interesting. And till then, listen to us on Spotify, watch us on YouTube, keep bantering with us. And
yes, let's do it. See you next week, guys. Bye. Ciao. Bye. Ciao, Luca.